Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. We have some breaking news to bring you here today. I think you need to know this pretty urgently. This conflict over in the Middle East could give you 20, 30, 40+% downside. If this were to spiral out of control, if the worst case scenario possible were to happen. Some big escalations on this front. We need to get into it here in this video. I also want to go over everything that's going on with AMC stock. What you need to know, AMC is down about 6% today. Yeah, so not the best day out there. Let's just call it that. People are pretty fearful. Big money, definitely fearful. So let's start off with some of this breaking news from this conflict. And again, that's why we've been covering it. 20, 30, 40% downside. It's by far the biggest catalyst that could move our markets. Data is not going to move our markets the same way this could. The Fed's not going to move the markets the same way this could. Unless the economy just completely deteriorated in a short amount of time, there's nothing that could really hold a candle to the financial implications this could have and the amount of fear this could cause in the markets. And if you've been watching this channel, well, we've been correct. I mean, the markets have been falling as this situation has been escalating. Now, what happened today? Biden arrived overnight and he left by about noon. They did not speak very long. He went over there, he made a speech, and GTFO'd out the country. Some of the news that we're getting since then, not exactly the greatest. So this news came out 2 hours ago. It says USS Mount Whitney LCC-20, a Blue Ridge class command ship, which is forward deployed to Gaeta, Italy, as the command and flagship of the U.S. Navy's 6th Fleet, has now departed from the port and is headed towards the Eastern Mediterranean in order to link up with the U.S. naval forces. This news is really not good. Quote, the Israeli War Cabinet reportedly told U.S. President Biden today during a meeting that they have now completed their preparations for an invasion of the Gaza Strip and that a ground operation is now imminent. We've already heard that if they do actually go into Gaza, Iran's getting involved, Hezbollah's getting involved, and that would mean we're getting involved. Okay, who knows if those countries and entities would just back off because we have shown so much commitment to get militarily involved in the situation. This is much different than Ukraine, and I think other, countries and entities understand that. We would actually, handle business if that happened, if need be. And hopefully that's enough to keep the situation from spreading into something much bigger, but maybe not. Some other news that we just got. This just came out about 30 minutes ago or so. The Israeli Defense Force has begun to construct a number of field hospitals and trauma centers in the upper and lower Galilee regions of northern Israel, likely in preparation for an increase in hostilities with Hezbollah on the border with Lebanon. That doesn't exactly sound too great, and you've seen rockets being fired towards Tel Aviv for the third or fourth time just today, coming from Gaza towards Tel Aviv. So it doesn't look like this conflict is slowing down at all. It looks like it's actually getting much worse. Now, you can forget basically everything I just said. Okay? None of that matters. In terms of the markets, sure, yes, it's tragic and I wish I didn't have to report on this. Yes, it could give you big downside. If you're someone that is in the markets, that is an investor in our markets, you really want to pay attention to what the money is doing, okay? That's what you want to pay attention to. And a very strange dynamic is happening today. So, on one hand, bonds are falling. Bonds are down over 1% today. Investors are selling the bonds. They don't want to own the treasuries. Yields are rising. This is not a risk-on move or a risk-off move. Like when there's fear out there in the world, investors want to protect their money and they buy assets they deem as, hedges or risk-free, which treasuries fall perfectly in that category. So you're not getting a fearful reaction from the bond market, but with Gold's up about 1.5% today, following the largest update in gold that you've seen. That was back here on October 13th in the last almost 4 years now, since the bottom of the Rona crash. You haven't seen an uptick in gold this aggressive in, quite a while. Even if you pull up the RSI on gold is basically vertical. There's been and it was oversold. Like, just since this conflict has started, there's a lot of money flowing into gold. That's not exactly great. Now, if you look at the dollar as well, we'll go ahead and refresh this chart. For whatever reason, it doesn't update by itself. You can see the dollar is also catching a buy today, catching a bid, up 0.29%. Basically going vertical ever since you hit the lows back in July. This is affecting company earnings right now. This is something that has an impact on company earnings literally every single day. So the higher this goes, the higher it stays, the worse off company earnings are going to be. You've had the dollar kind of be a tailwind to help out company earnings since the start of 2023, and now in the third quarter, the dollar is definitely going to be a headwind compared to Q2. Another dynamic of this market selling that we could be seeing is the fact that you will have earnings that really kick in full steam ahead here in after hours. You have Tesla, Netflix, Lam Research, which is a chip company. This one could affect Nvidia quite a bit. Nvidia is down 4.5% right now, so they're already in their own, problems. Las Vegas Sands, Alcoa, Discover, Columbia Bank, Zion, Steel Dynamics, and Crown Castle. They all report earnings today and after hours. Tomorrow, pre-market, AT&T, American Airlines, TSMC, the Blackstone Group, Nokia, KeyBank, Truist, Union Pacific, and Snap-on. So a couple earnings there. Really, next week is when you get into your Microsofts, your Googles, your Amazons, right? I don't believe Apple is next week. That might be the following week after that. But regardless, Tesla and Netflix are going to set the tone for tech earnings. If Netflix and Tesla have bad earnings, in which they're going to be coming out here in just a moment, just know stocks are probably not going to do well if they don't have good earnings. And this, as you can see today, all of this information, it is negatively affecting AMC stock today. And it doesn't look like it's going to get better. So if you do see downside in the markets, it's probably because of this conflict over in the Middle East. It might not be a terrible idea to be hedged out in this specific scenario. I do have some hedges on the portfolio. If you guys want to come hedge out your portfolio as well, link down below in the description of this video. Obviously, that's not gonna be for everyone, but I think the risk reward does not look good to the upside here. Now, if you do look at something like the NASDAQ, you pull up the RSI, you're still pretty neutral here. So you could definitely see more downside before you get one of those oversold bounces like we've seen back here late September, early October. You actually recovered quite a bit, and now you've just been giving some of that back. So we'll see what does happen with the situation. I will keep you guys up to date if the situation does get worse. Once you actually do see the invasion from Israel into the Gaza Strip, that's where you could get bigger tensions flying, potentially other entities involved, like a Hezbollah, like in Iran. And that is really what gives you big downside. Depending on what action Iran or Saudi Arabia were to take on oil and energy, if they were to like sanction the US, which you always hear about the US sanctioning other countries, the US can get sanctioned too. If they were to get sanctioned, obviously that would not be great, but just if they restricted the flow of energy, because most of the world's energy, 20 to 30% of the world's oil, flows through the Strait of Hormuz every single day, that's where you get that 30-40% downside. I think just involvement with the US, Hezbollah, Iran could give you up to 20% downside in our market. So once that imminent invasion does happen, that's where you want to be very careful out there in the land of equities, guys. So there you have that. AMC stock, like I said, is down about 6.9% right now. It's definitely not benefiting from this down move in the markets. That is for sure. And just with the risk off kind of positioning today, investors buying bonds, buying the dollar. In this specific scenario, given this is a conflict in the Middle East, Oil up 1.5% today is also one of those flights to safety as well, because oil is not going to fall off of an escalation in conflict. Oil would probably rise at that point. So oil is usually not a safety asset, especially if it's conflict with other countries. But anytime it's in the Middle East, it does tend to give oil kind of a safety bid at that, just to keep things simple. Now, if you look at treasury yields today, this is also having a negative impact on stocks, but you are starting to see treasuries get bought a little bit more heading into the end of the day. A little bit of that fear move starting to make its way into bonds. 30-year treasury is now only up 3.5 basis points. The 10-year treasury is up about 5 basis points. You did break above 4.91%. That was a new high on the 10-year that you have seen since 2007. Obviously, it's fallen a little bit since then. A little bit of that fear starting to make its way into the bond market. And then, like we said, oil is up about 2% today. Definitely a fear move here, and maybe even a good hedge on the portfolio could be buying some, buying some oil stocks. That, potentially is not a terrible idea. We'll have to see. If you guys, again, want all of my trades in real time, every trade I make, link down below in the description of this video. Nonetheless, let's get into some specific data with the U.S. And I just want to remind you guys, if you guys did not see some of the last videos, yesterday the White House has discussed U.S. military response if Hezbollah attacks Israel. So, the U.S. almost certainly would get involved at that point, let alone Iran. And then if the U.S. attacked Hezbollah, what does Iran do? What does Syria do? What do the other militias in this area do? Probably not so great things. That would probably not be a good outcome. So just so you guys know, I'm not making this up or speculating here. This is something that has already been reported to us from Axios. Now, let's get into some of the option activity first things first. This is really amplifying any of the moves that you're going to see in AMC. You have calls in the money about 32,000, calls out the money 167,000, puts in the money at about 25,000, puts out the money 101,000. So there's a lot of puts and calls. Definitely more calls than puts. But if you do get downside, if you do get a continued downside move and start to break under key levels, in which $9 per share is a big one, then the option activity on the put side is definitely enough to help push that down even further. You kind of just have to wait and see how this plays out. I am very bullish on AMC, but if the markets do deteriorate, if something does happen, that's just not going to be a good situation all around. And I wouldn't have high expectations that AMC would do phenomenally well and go through a huge rally. It's possible, but I wouldn't have that expectation. Now, if you take a look at the Ortex data over here, you do have a short score of 58, $161 million worth of short positions currently in AMC stock, estimated short interest of free float at 8.25%, free flow out on loan at 12.41%, shares out on loan 24.54 million, days to cover 1.34, cost to borrow 1.58, utilization of 56.74%. So again, nothing that's too crazy. I think the biggest change is definitely the cost to borrow fees, in which these numbers are basically the same as the last video. You have cost to borrow average of 1.13%, cost to borrow max of 14.39%, and cost to borrow minimum at 0.77%. So nothing is too crazy from the last video. Numbers look pretty similar. Again, the puts call ratio you are seeing way down, and again, that's kind of with my bullish thesis. The put to call ratio being down this quickly does allow for a bigger upside move. And if you take a look at the option activity that is getting flagged over here from Ortex, you are seeing 2 orders totaling $36,000 today with a positive order value of 70%. Take that with a grain of salt. Obviously, there's more orders. If you actually take a look here at the option activity for the day today with AMC, including all of the option activity, there's been about 83,000 calls bought and about 47,000 puts bought. So even though you're down about 6% today, the calls are outweighing the puts, and people look pretty excited about AMC for that continued upside move. Again, if something bad happens out there in the world, it's just not going to matter what's going on with AMC at that point. the markets are probably going to sell off AMC. And again, you want to watch that $9 level to the downside. To the upside, $10 is a big psychological resistance. You want to close above 10, and then after that, you could basically make your way to about $15 per share pretty easily, guys. So I'm going to go 10 to that. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and source your comments, questions, or concerns down below in the comment section. You guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.